go. I'd like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Littleton Planning Commission, Monday, June 26th, 2017. Could we please have the roll call? Thank you.
Commissioner Bolt?
Here.
Commissioner Breidenbaugh?
Here.
Commissioner Corbett?
Here.
Commissioner Graham is not here yet. Commissioner Kruger?
Here.
There's Commissioner Graham. Commissioner Reynolds?
Here.
Commissioner Rudnicki?
Here.
Commissioner Stallman?
Here.
And Commissioner Schwartzbacher?
Here.
We have a full boat tonight. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. You all have the agenda. You've all looked at it. Is there any changes, corrections, deletions? Seeing none, we'll move on. Minutes to be approved. You all have the minutes. Is there a motion, please?
I move to approve the minutes as presented from the regularly scheduled June 12th Planning Commission meeting.
We have a second? Second. Lynn's second. Any discussion? We need to vote. We have unanimous approval of the minutes. Next up is public comment. This is public comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. You have 3 minutes to speak. Please give your name, your address, or your district number. The lady down here who just disappeared, she will hold up 2 cards, a yellow card when you have 30 seconds left to speak, and then a red card when your 3 minutes is up. So please finish up. We will all be civil. We'll all be respectful. We have no sign-up sheet, so I'll open it up if anyone wishes to approach the Planning Commission. We have a raised hand.
Members of the Commission, my name is Kent Bagley. I live at 1467 West Briarwood Avenue in District 3, and I wanted to make some comments on one of your major projects coming up as suggested by and requested by the City Council, which is the Bellevue Avenue Corridor Study. I want to congratulate the City for conducting the study and plan. And I think that the major benefits includes the corner of Bellevue and Federal, southwest corner, which is the last piece of the urban renewal component. And it will go from Santa Fe to roughly Lowell Boulevard. So I think that this is a great start, so I want to congratulate you. But I want to also say that I think that there are some specific requirements that are going to be necessary during this process. Clearly, it needs to be overseen by the community development staff and your well-versed staff and the director of the staff, but it needs to be completed by a consultant team. There is not the capacity to do that kind of study internally on the staff's part, which I think you already know and I think is probably already set up. And the effort must be fully funded to get this done in a reasonable amount of time. And the study/plan must have an implementation component as a portion of that plan. It's absolutely critical that there must be an implementation component with a timeline of how that's going to be done. Not saying what the timeline must be, but there must be a timeline for implementation of whatever the plan's going to be. The other issue is that the City Council must buy into the implementation plan and must fund the implementation plan during that time frame, whatever the timeline is for this plan. Lessons learned from doing this plan are absolutely critical because I think you will stumble upon some issues that have not been done previously, and a lesson learned component must be included. Other similar plans have been done throughout studies have been done for Littleton with no implementation plan, no backup money, and are basically not worth the paper they're printed on. This will effectively be a pilot for other major plans, potentially in other corridors like Santa Fe, Broadway, Littleton Boulevard, and others, commercial corridors. So thank you for your time. Good luck with it, and I wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak on items not on tonight's agenda? Pam?
I'm Pam Chadbourne. I live a block and a half from here. So just to follow up on the Bellevue Corridor Plan, implementation and funding is nice, but when you're developing a study or a plan, feasibility is crucial. And that is what I have not seen in 6 years of watching city development of plans, is feasibility. So you folks made some good comments when you were talking about it, about what businesses work and what don't. And you know what? We have an economic development department. We pay staff to do economic intelligence. That's actually their functional name. And it's their job to figure out what businesses can work, what businesses can't, and kind of a range in there that have varying degrees of possibility. And we need to hear from them. We, the public, you, the decision makers. So please make sure that you guide our staff to bring in the economic development analysis. They're supposed to, and they have done in the past, these kind of business gap analyses. One thing I'm eager to hear from them is what businesses are going to decline or reduce in size because of online buying, and which ones are not, because I guarantee you some are not. And actually, those are going to be the ones that are walkable communities, and that's our opportunity in the Bellevue Corridor. We have a ton of housing there already. So let's use that to our advantage and the citizens' advantage. So let me say feasibility is key. I don't want an implementation plan if we don't know feasibility. You've got to show us how it's going to work and that it's going to work first. So thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no hands raised, we'll move to our general business, which there is none. So we'll move to our public hearings. First case up is PC Planning Commission Resolution 15-2017, a resolution recommending approval of Santa Fe and Arapahoe General Plan Development Plan. We have staff ready for a presentation.
Good evening. I'm Andrea Mimnaugh with the planning staff. And tonight is a public hearing. It's PB Resolution 15-2007, and it concerns a proposed general plan development plan called the Santa Fe and Arapahoe General Plan Development Plan. The process for developing on a property, when it includes a general plan development plan, is to start first with the rezoning and general plan development plan. And Planning Commission will make a recommendation, and then the project will move on to City Council, who will make the decision on that rezoning and GPDP. The next step is platting. There's preliminary plat, which will be approved or decided by Planning Commission, and then the final plat, which is decided by City Council. Then finally, we get to the site development plan, which tends to be a lot of drainage engineering and the fine zoning detail, and that's administrative. The location of the Santa Fe and Arapahoe General Plan Development Plan is on the west side of Santa Fe. The address is 6505 through 6509 South Santa Fe. And there are two properties involved. You can see on this map, there's a property that is shown in brown, that's outlined in red. It's currently zoned RE. and that's a large lot residential zone. And then the other property is shown in orange underneath it, and that's the Arapahoe Mental Health Center property, also known as the AMHC property. Together, these properties have joined forces to be part of a general plan development plan, and we'll talk about that later. But I'd also like to point out another feature of the property right now, which will come into play a little bit later. The orange property, the AMHC property, is part of another general plan development plan together with the yellow property underneath that. That's the yellow one that kind of wraps around to the south and the west. These two properties make up the Riverbend Plaza General Plan Development Plan. And on your agenda tonight, there are two rezonings. The first one is the one that we're addressing right now, and the second one has to do with that yellow parcel in the Riverbend Plaza. And if both are successful through City Council, the Riverbend Plaza GPD would be eliminated from the zoning map, and the Riverbend Plaza south portion will be incorporated into Lee Gulch Overlook, and the orange one, which is the AMHC property, would be incorporated into the new Santa Fe Arapahoe GPDP. This is a picture from Santa Fe looking west towards the property. You can see the AMHC property over on your left, the roof line there, and then the property to the north, which is called the Sutton property, after Gary Sutton, the owner, and that is the property where you see grass and trees. The Sutton property consists currently of two single-family homes, and at the rear of the lot, there are two larger shed buildings. And so under the RE zoning, essentially, single-family development and group homes are the two uses that are allowed under that property. On the AMHC property, the property is generally already built out with a treatment facility and living facilities together with that. And there is not a lot of change associated with that property as a combination of this GPDP. So we'll move on to the project description. And starting with the Arapahoe Mental Health Center. And you can see here on the left, you can see the driveway coming in. And then over to the right, you can see the Sutton property with the RE zoning. In your packet, the GPDP plans, there is a copy of an illustrative plan of the Sutton property, and it's shown up here, the larger image. And what they are proposing is storage uses, along with some other uses, including restaurant and warehouse. However, as we understand it, as actually an operator, or not an operator, but somebody in the storage industry who has made the application and does intend to develop the property for these uses. On the right-hand side, which is the portion up towards Santa Fe, would be self-storage, and at the rear of the property that borders Mary Carter Greenway would be garage condos. Garage condos is a relatively new land use that some people haven't yet heard of, and essentially it is a series of large storage units that people with a lot of stuff, oftentimes RVs or boats, will store them. And they are condominiums, so you can have the opportunity to purchase and own your own unit. The Sutton property, as I mentioned, has the storage uses, restaurant and warehousing, and the self-storage units are depicted on the illustrative picture here. It is multi-stories, you see, and the plan has a limit of up to 800 units within that building. The garage condos, which would be located at the rear, have up to a maximum 35 units. There are also development standards that are proposed along with this GPDP, and I've I've included those that I think are most important here as part of the presentation. The full list is in the staff report. They're proposing a building height of up to 51 feet, and that would be for the multi-story self-storage that you see here in the illustrative plan. At the back of the property where the garage condos are, of course, they're not stacked because they're often storing vehicles, and they would have a maximum height of 32 feet. Setbacks on the property would be set 100 feet from Santa Fe, and that's a building setback, and then also 50 feet from the Mary Carter Greenway. There are setbacks on the sides of 10 feet. So that the 10 feet on the south would relate to the AMHC property and the Lee Gulch property, and on the north to Denver Seminary. Open space is proposed in two different percentages, broken up again by use. For the front property adjacent to Santa Fe, it would be 15%. And on the rear property, it is proposed at 20%. Architecture has the applicant has committed to following what is in the design standards for the Santa Fe corridor, which make use of the vernacular agricultural elements that have been found in Littleton. And you may know that many of the redevelopment along Santa Fe has already built within those design guidelines. So moving on to the Arapahoe Mental Health Center. As I mentioned before, there wouldn't be a lot of change here. You can see in this plan that there are two buildings that exist there. And there's also some parking. The parking that's highlighted in yellow towards Santa Fe there on the right would be some additional parking that is needed by the AMHC. So continued use for the treatment facility with housing. Open space, we have changes to open space and building setbacks. So they are looking to reduce their open space requirement from 50% down to 30%. Meanwhile, the building setback against Santa Fe would be increased. So the building setback would be 80 feet under the proposal, where it's currently 40 feet. Another feature of the GPDP are the access points to Santa Fe. And under this plan, there would be likely a reduction in the number of access points. This is something that CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, likes to see. It helps control traffic better along the highway. We're looking at a possibility of going from 3 accesses down to 1, and that 1 access point being shared both by the storage uses and by the AMHC. You'll also notice that north of the storage uses, there is a public right-of-way. It's Vinewood Street. It goes through the Denver Seminary, and currently it comes to a dead end when it hits the property line. And so this is another feature that Vinewood would be extended, likely as an easement, through the storage uses to connect again with Santa Fe at that same point. Okay, now we're going to go back to that Riverbend Plaza GPDP. And here you see the 2 parcels again, one in red and one outlined in green. And according to our zoning code, a zoning district has a minimum threshold of size of 180,000 square feet. And together, the storage uses, the Sutton property, and the AMHC property exceed that limit. But as a result of that, the remaining property in the Riverbend Plaza GPDP becomes undersized. So it would be a PDR district that falls under the 180,000 square foot threshold. You'll see that on the agenda there's another, as I mentioned, there's another rezoning application, and that concerns that parcel. And so what's being presented here is that if the GPDP would like to move forward, there's an opportunity to rezone the lower property to open space. And open space is a fitting zone for it because, in fact, it already is open space. It's one of 7 parcels that make up the League Gulch Overlook Open Space and Trailhead. It's a city-owned property. City owns 5 parcels, South Suburban owns 2. And so it would go from PDR to open space, or OS zone, as would fit its use. And the zoning code does not include a threshold for a minimum size for the open space zone. So, by rezoning the open space on Leak Gulch, it would enable the GPDP with the storage uses and the AMHC to meet their threshold and not cause an undersized property to be exist then under the rezoning. So there is a condition of approval, suggested a condition of approval that the open space parcel be rezoned to open space in conjunction in order for the GPDP to continue. So we'll move into the analysis now, and for a zoning map amendment, again, it's the 180,000 square foot minimum threshold. The combination of the 2 parcels would result in 6.01 acres, and that is 261,796 square feet, and exceeds the 180,000 square foot threshold. In a planned development district, there are criteria that need to be met in order for it to be approved. There are 6 of them, and I have highlighted 1 in this presentation. All 6 are in your report. And it's the first criterion, and it says to encourage more creative and effective use of land and public or private services, and to accommodate changes in land development technology so the resulting economies benefit the community. And the proposed storage uses shall provide new storage opportunities within the community, which are in high demand due to homes that are now built smaller than a generation ago. The garage condo use will provide options for new and existing residents to store their large vehicles off-site, where they are often considered eyesores when they're within their neighborhoods. The multi-story self-storage is an effective use of land in that it reduces the amount of land needed when compared to other single-story self-story uses. In addition, the units being stacked, the amount of drive areas within the development is also reduced. A GPDP must also be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And I'll address a couple of the policies and goals from both the citywide plan and the Santa Fe Corridor Plan. The first is from the citywide plan, the vision for the future of Littleton. Littleton will value livability, diversity, and progress, value the importance of its citizens, its natural resources, strive for sustainability in economic, environmental, and social decision, raise the bar to increase the quality of community and economic development. And the staff response and analysis to this is that the Sutton property has been underutilized for many years, with 2 residences on approximately 4 acres. The existing RE zoning allows only for single-family homes and group homes. The rezoning of the property presents an opportunity for redevelopment that is consistent with the vision and goals of the citywide plan. The proposed PD plan takes advantage of its convenient location on South Santa Fe Drive for uses that would draw customers and employees from the greater area of the city, while providing a 50-foot building setback at the rear of the property along the Mary Carter Greenway that would be landscaped. The proposed land uses are appropriate for the site in that the storage uses do not generate a lot of traffic and do not produce a lot of noise, a benefit to the adjacent Denver Seminary to the north, which includes dormitories at its south property line. The next item is Goal 1, a dynamic Littleton, and Policy 8 states that the city should require that new commercial development be appropriately buffered from adjacent uses. The proposed new development within the PD is limited to the Sutton property. Adjacent uses include the Mary Carter Greenway, the Denver Seminary, and the AMHC property, which is a component of the proposed PD plan. The Sutton property, I mentioned, is adjacent to the Mary Carter Greenway, and it does have a proposed 50-foot setback from the Greenway that will provide landscaping and buffering to the popular nature trail. And with respect to the Sutton property buffering from Denver Seminary, the building setback for the north property line bordering the Denver Seminary's dormitories and parking is proposed at 10 feet. For buffering, the proposed PD plan includes a 4-foot landscaped area adjacent to the property line and a solid 8-foot fence along the property line. And then I'd also like to point out that with this development, there would be a visual quality of the new development in that the GPDP requires new development to be consistent with the Santa Fe Corridor design guidelines. It requires a higher level of design consistent with agricultural building forms and should provide visual appeal where it is seen from adjacent properties. The next goal is goal 2, capitalize and expand on Littleton's most valuable outdoor resources. And policy 1 says to treat the South Platte River and its tributaries as the city's most important natural assets. The staff response is that the project's proposed 50-foot building setback along Mary Carter Greenway will help to maintain the existing character of the Greenway. In addition, the PD plan has a lower maximum building height allowance for that rear end of the property, which fronts onto the Greenway, and a maximum of 32 feet in height. The garage condos should not provide an overbearing visual impact to the Greenway. And it is my understanding that although there was no rendering that was shown in your packet, that the applicant does have one tonight, and we'll include that in their presentation tonight. And then finally, the Santa Fe Corridor Plan. Policy 9 is to develop a landscaped river edge along the east side of South Platte River to protect the aesthetic and visual appearance of the corridor. And we have discussed that. There would be a proposed 50-foot setback, and it would be landscaped. And finally, transportation policy number 3 of that corridor plan is to encourage access points that service multiple property owners and internal circulation patterns. As we discussed earlier, it may be possible to combine 3 access points on that property down into one. And this point will be further evaluated down the line as we get into platting and the site development plan. At that point, CDOT will be weighing in and be looking at specifics to see what is specifically possible in terms of combining those access points and the specific configuration and alignment of that road. So in conclusion, staff finds that the proposed zoning meets minimum size requirements for a new zone district. The GPDP complies with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan and the intent of a planned development district. PC Resolution 15-2007 reflects the staff recommendation and is included in your packet. And I'll available for any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions of staff of a technical nature? Start with Lynn.
Having worked with the condo concept, the garage condo concept before in another state, does the state of Colorado have the provisions it needs to develop the condos without living space?
We have looked at the garage condos, the use of that as garage condos actually quite in depth. And we are aware that there are some garage condos where it's renters or owners do in fact move in or possibly spend a night here and there. And so there is a plan, there is a note on the GPDP that the garage condos shall not be used for residences and shall not include any overnight stays. And I think the applicant is also willing to speak to that.
But my concern is the actual development of the condos. the legalizing and partitioning of them. Does the Colorado laws allow that?
Well, I will need to turn to our attorney if you have any information on that.
And this was something that's not we were not asked as city attorneys to review. I think it's something that's appropriate to ask the applicant, and something we can get back to you on. But that's my answer. It's not something we were asked to look into, so I'm not sure what the Colorado law says about this.
Okay, one other question I had was regarding, you mentioned a restaurant.
Yes, I think the applicants can speak to this a little bit more, but in addition to the storage uses, there would also be a possibility in the event that the storage uses weren't developed, that the site could be used for restaurant and or warehousing. And so as part of the application, we did look at the feasibility and the compatibility of those uses with the surrounding area and felt that they were acceptable.
And you're out of the flood zone, right?
The flood zone on this property, there is flood zone on the property, and it is down towards the west and includes perhaps the kind of meanders, but includes the last 20 to 50 feet as it's adjacent to the Mary Carter Greenway. And so that is included in that 50-foot setback that's required.
Thank you.
Go right down the line. Andrew?
How many stories is the first building? It's 51 feet in the zoning proposal. How many stories is that building?
Yeah, let's go back to the illustrative plan. We are looking at 3 stories.
It's a 3-story building at 51 feet?
Yes, and you know, the applicants can speak to this more. One of the reasons that the height is perhaps taller than it could be is the design guidelines, and we're looking at pitched roofs that are consistent with the agricultural style of Littleton and has been developed along Santa Fe. And so with that pitched roof, it does bring that height up further. As a comparison, the height of the Denver Seminary dormitories are at 40 feet. And another comparison to the Breckenridge Brewery, they have an allowable height of 50 foot for their buildings and 60 feet for their tanks.
Thank you.
Bruce?
Refresh my memory, if you please, concerning the 51-foot height on a sloped parcel is what, the midpoint height, or how do we calculate again?
Yes, well, it depends on how the property is graded. And I think the applicant can speak more to this. It may be terraced, or perhaps it will have a difference in grade. And so per our zoning code, we measure to the ridge of the roof line.
Yeah, but
And then we take the low point, if, for example, if there is a grade,
Better
we
speak
take
into
the
the
highest
microphone.
point. We take the highest point from that elevation and the lowest point,
okay.
and then we do that for all 4 or however many elevations there are, and those 4 numbers are averaged, and that becomes the building height.
Okay, and so then so essentially the entire development is a single height because it's based on that average, or are there, as opposed to, what do you got, 3 or 4 buildings, I think? 4 buildings, they're not, staggered down, right, necessarily as it heads to the river?
I'm not sure of the question.
Okay, is your average based on the entire parcel as opposed to the individual unit buildings?
Yes, it's on the individual unit, individual building, yeah.
Okay, so the area A1 is a single building, it would have a height, and then the 3 buildings in area A2 could theoretically have different heights as it staggers down. But on the A1, since it's going to be closest to the street, and in theory could, I don't know, have you guys looked at any sort of visual obstruction to the people on the other side of the railroad tracks? I assume there isn't much by virtue of the fact that it's up on a hill and there's a pretty steep grade anyway.
You know, it's possible that the building may obstruct some views, and trees can also do the same. Our comp plan doesn't specify that that's something that we take into account.
I
The camp
understand.
plan, actually the Santa Fe corridor plan, does talk about views in certain specific locations, usually centered around intersections.
Okay.
So I guess I don't have information on that.
Okay. On page, oh, come on. This is why I always print the thing.
17 pages, it takes a
Yeah.
while.
Well, and then some. On page 2 of the staff legislation text, the last sentence says, the proposed Santa Fe and Arapahoe GPDP has approximately 200 foot of frontage along the greenway. You said they were going to have a 50-foot buffer, so I assume, am I interpreting it correctly when it basically says it's 200 feet long and a 50-foot buffer in? Is that the way to interpret that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right. On page, I'm sorry, here, hang tight. No, there it is. On page 8, I'm assuming this is a typo, just based on what you're saying and the use that you're proposing. But it says, under traffic generated, the uses are anticipated to generate approximately 542 daily weekday trips. That seems highly unlikely to me.
You know, that in fact was in the traffic report, and I myself thought that that seemed high. And
That's a lot of storage.
yeah, so I had a conversation with our traffic engineer about it, and how often businesses and people may come to the storage units. And he thought that it was a fair number. Now, the applicant can speak to personal experience being in the business and may have a different number, but this is what was stated on the
Okay.
traffic report.
All right, all right. Let me ask you, and I'll throw it out there, but as a point of clarification for our attorney, by itself, the Sutton parcel is below the 180,000 square foot threshold. It only gets over the 180,000 square foot threshold by adding in the Arapahoe mental health parcel. But as is stipulated throughout, there's zero land use changes to the Arapahoe parcel, notwithstanding it's theoretically being, quote unquote, not really rezoned per se, but it's in a new GPDP. And the question ultimately, and I think the attorney needs to address it for all to hear, is that, you know, that this is an acceptable approach with respect to the municipal code. I'm asking the question, is this an acceptable approach for the municipal code to basically just drag in a parcel in order to meet a threshold rezone level, as opposed to actually having to do something that's a different land use on the parcel that's being drug in?
And the way the code is currently written, this is an acceptable way to do this, and both planning and legal counsel agree on this. It's the way the code is currently written, this is an acceptable way to do it.
Okay, all right. I'll tell you what, let me stop there and pass the baton, and I may come back.
I'm going to pass the baton back for one more question.
Just real quick,
okay.
do we have a height on the Echo Star building and a height on the ACC Arapahoe Community College building? Do we know the heights of those?
I don't have those memorized, yeah.
Commissioner Graham, we can look that up, but off the top of our head, we do not have that. But we'll see what we can find here.
Be helpful. Thank you.
Is that it, Andrew?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
One other one. Have we done any soil testing out here to ascertain whether there's hazardous materials? Looks like somebody's shaking their head yes. So
That's a
they'll
good-
address it.
Good question for the applicant.
Thanks.
David?
So I understand that you talked about the importance of the Mary Carter Greenway, South Platte Park. You mentioned, I think, Lee Gulch open space, which this property touches. And, you know, I can see from Policy 5, which from the, you know, the Santa Fe corridor, which I feel like it was written before the increased importance of these parks, you know, came to the forefront, I guess. I just wonder why we're pushing back buildings from Santa Fe towards the parks rather than the other way around when we've got, you know, thousands of cars a day going down Santa Fe, and then in addition to that, reducing the amount of open space and increasing the height. I don't know that you can answer that, but is there a reason that we're pushing back from Santa Fe? That's the question.
Well, there are a couple of reasons to push back from Santa Fe. The comp plan, the Santa Fe corridor plan, does in fact talk about creating a landscaped border as an attractive component of the Santa Fe Drive highway. And then as another reason, highways can sometimes be widened. And so that does allow for the space for the highway to expand if need be.
Right, but we've got 10 feet on either side, and we're increasing from what to 100 feet on Santa Fe? I mean, is it a 50-foot buffer right now, and it's increasing to 100?
Yes, and yes, it is a big difference. It does create that buffer, and one other thing that I didn't mention is that there is the potential extension of Vinewood Street, and that would be the Vinewood runs through the Denver Seminary property as right-of-way and is being looked at as potentially an easement through the Sutton property. And so there will need to be some space on either side of that roadway should that go through as well.
Well, so what it looks like from the plan, and I understand it's just a plan at this point, Vinewood kind of ends, and then it goes up or towards the east, then south, and then out the driveway. So you're saying that it might not do that, it might go straight through and be extended through the Sutton property to the open space?
Well, there have been a couple of options that have been looked at. I think this one is perhaps, I'd use the word likely, but it has not been vetted in terms of all of the different various pieces that we need to look at with establishing a road within a development, and also taking into consideration that the storage uses are at this point showing an illustrative plan, and so we don't know for sure where those buildings would be located either.
Right. And then I think the question on height was answered. I guess that's it for now.
I look forward to hearing from the applicants about the proposed uses and the very specific proposed uses that were put into the request. But Andrea, can you please clarify in the text here it says land uses of all types are permitted in PDI or land development industrial. What uses really are permitted in that?
Yes, that's a direct quote from our zoning code, land uses of all types. And so we have interpreted that to mean not only land uses that are necessarily identified in our use matrix of the zoning code, but other ones as too. And this is a good example. The applicant is looking at a multi-story self-storage facility, which isn't identified really as a use in the use chart. The use chart has mini storage, but really just at 1 story tall with a maximum height of 12 feet. So I bring that as an example, but land uses of all types are in fact permitted in the PDI zone. Through the GPDP process, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of these PDs would allow uses of land all types. And so, in fact, it's ratcheted down to the ones that you see that are part of this proposal: storage uses, warehousing, and restaurants.
it's sort of an eclectic mix, right? So restaurant as well, and then I don't know what wholesaling necessarily means. Is that distribution center?
Warehousing, yes, that could mean a distribution center.
And so the use tables that you've put together, which we appreciate, is there anything that jumps out at you on those use tables that concerns you?
Out of those four, out of the restaurant, warehousing.
Not necessarily the uses, but even the rest of the components of the use tables.
Well, it's a staff analysis that the proposal, in fact, meets the criteria for GPDP and also is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And so we do, in fact, feel that this is an appropriate list of uses and other conditions of developing within that GPDP.
Okay. Thank you.
John?
Start out with page 17. It looks like there's a typo in that. It mentions freestanding zone district of less than 108,000 and then parentheses 180,000, so that should be 180,000.
Thank you.
Then further on down, I guess it's trying to find it here. I guess that's outside of the staff report, my next comment. So my other comment then is the staff aware of the South Platte Working Group?
Yes, in fact, we are.
Is the South Platte Working Group South Platte River Corridor Vision a reference document in the comprehensive plan?
I don't believe it is.
Sorry, we use them as a referral, if that's the question. Do we send applications to that group? And my understanding is that group also has been putting together a general outline for review of their document. So we definitely did get that to them. Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking that if for general development and zoning changes and plan developments along the South Platte River corridor, do you specifically seek out and look at the South Platte River Corridor Vision Plan of December 2013?
What we do is refer, and they have an opportunity to respond with written comments that we work through. And sometimes with these referrals, we go back and forth. In fact, we went back and forth with South Suburban on this project on a couple of issues before settling on how the proposal could meet the comp plan and the needs of South Suburban.
So did the South Platte Working Group have a comment on this proposed development?
The working group did not respond, but we did, as I mentioned, we did get, we had quite a bit of back and forth with the South Suburban Parks and Rec.
Okay. And what was the nature of that back and forth?
There was a discussion on whether or not there would be a path between the property down to the Mary Carter Greenway. And there's some interest in making accessibility to the Greenway something that happens with redevelopment. But then there's also the types of uses, and is it necessarily appropriate for every use? And so the current thinking is that best without a connection at this location, and that's not a final decision. It could be potentially reevaluated during the site development plan.
Has staff read the South Platte River Corridor Vision of December 2013?
South Platte River Vision.
I mean, do we have a copy of the plan?
Yeah, have you?
Yes.
Have you read it in context to this proposed development?
So like Andrea said, we aim to provide the information to the various agencies and then ask that they give us their comments back for plans that are not administered or maintained specifically by community development.
Does staff take the recommendations of that type of plan into consideration for their recommendations?
So like we said, in this particular, and maybe the applicant too can speak to this somewhat, because we're not sure if they may have had outreach with that particular agency or group. We sent it out to all of our referrals, and then we do ask people to give us info or comment back if they have something that they would like specifically to be addressed. So that's our role in this.
Okay. Well, I was surprised that it wasn't one of the criteria for evaluation on this proposal, and perhaps, you know, based on the emphasis on the river corridor and all of the development money that has been put into restoring the river channel, enhancing recreational and wildlife uses, and increasing the community connectivity to the river corridor, and visioning a different aspect of how we developed properties adjacent to the river as the most valuable resource to the Littleton community, that plan was not mentioned in the staff report, nor the recommendations of that report detailed. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Down here, Robin?
Good evening. Let's see if I can scoot this over a little. So in 10-2-23, the PD districts allow for sub-districts, and I was curious why the AMHC was not left as a PDR as a sub-district, and thinking, well, perhaps it doesn't comply then with the 10-12-2, the amendment procedures. So basically, why wasn't it left a PDR? Is it because it can and still comply with the 180?
Yes, that's a question that we looked at actually and worked with our city attorneys on interpreting the code. And what was determined through working with the attorneys that, well, the sub-districts may be termed sub-districts in that context. In fact, PDR, PDC, and PDI are different zones on the zoning map. And based on other sections of the code, the determination was made that whether you have any one of those three, each one would need to meet the 180,000 square foot threshold. And so for that reason, the AMHC property was incorporated into the PDI, and in fact, under PDI, zoning can be a permitted use.
Thank you. So does changing the AMHC to a PDI have any negative ramifications on Littleton? Does it change taxes or anything along those lines?
In terms of a zone district that's under a PD plan, it really comes down to the specific allowed uses and the performance standards within that GPDP. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that any taxing or any other thing is determined per a zone district.
Yeah. Zone district has no influence on taxing. So.
Thank you. So this is a
Robin,
little bit
can you speak a little clearer, closer to the microphone, please?
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, it's rather set back there.
Wait till Jason has to speak into it.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a long question, so bear with me. So in the parcel PA2, which borders Lee Gulch Overlook, the setback is 10 feet, in which it looks like there's only 4 feet that will be open space. And these condo garages are going to be very visible. So if you walk down Lee Gulch Trail right now, you can see that whole area, a lot of it. You can see the metal barns that are there now, and so that area really isn't covered up. and it slopes down so you can kind of see into it. So when I look at the citywide plan, and you mentioned this one, 1.8, it requires that new commercial development be appropriately buffered from the adjacent uses. It also states that, we value the importance of our natural resources. The Santa Fe corridor under the open space and the natural features goal states that we need to preserve and enhance these major natural features, and it includes Lee Gulch. Policy 2 says we need to preserve the quality of the open space, utilizing things such as increasing setbacks and/or land use controls. And I'm wondering what your thoughts on this is, because with only 4 feet, I just don't see how you can truly buffer. And this is a big area with big buildings, and one of them doesn't have a lot of, it's just a big building with some windows on it. And I'm really concerned when you're walking down Lee Gulch Trail, which I happen to access quite a bit going down to the river, that this is gonna look a little bit more like an eyesore.
So,
Your thoughts?
Yes, we did have thoughts on this at staff level, and while the 4 feet doesn't accommodate a lot of landscaping, it does provide some greenery, and the applicant has included as a design standard that the area would be fenced. Now, unlike the north property line, which would make use of a solid fence to screen from the Denver Seminary, this would likely be a metal fence that could be seen through. But the combination of the attractive fence, the 4 foot of landscaping, and the higher quality level of architecture that's required as part of this GPDP, we felt that that was sufficient.
Okay, I'll, just as an FYI, be coming at you guys with that same thing. So number 4 question is, here the parking is 1 in 100 units, or if we go to any of our comparable codes, it's 1 in 50 or 1 in 6,000 square feet, whichever is higher. And this storage unit, of course, is mostly internal, and I'm just curious your thoughts on sufficient parking for something like this. With you have 800 units, how many are inside, and usage of parking?
Yes, the applicant can speak to this because as he is familiar with the business, but this was, we did receive review from our transportation engineer who felt that based on current usage, that's an acceptable parking ratio that we would expect to see. It's always a, balance. Obviously, you need the amount of parking. We don't want to go over that because it creates an inefficiency in land use and more area that becomes paved as opposed to green. And so if we can do less and have a place for people to park, that's a good thing.
Okay, just one other question. And you've actually kind of touched upon this. So the comp plan under their transportation, our policy 7 on page 14, references continuing to support the widening of Santa Fe to 6 lanes. And you see this plan as being able to support that?
Yeah, as mentioned, we are looking at a 100-foot setback, and we are looking at the potential of extending Vinewood Street. Now, there is some extra landscaped buffering in there, and of course, we don't know exactly what the widening would be, exactly how many feet, but we felt that 100 feet was sufficient.
Thank you.
I would just add that along Santa Fe, we don't have 100 feet with every property, unfortunately.
Very true.
So it would always be, difficult process should the highway be widened.
Very much so, thank you.
My questions have been answered.
Okay.
No questions? I'm sorry. Okay. Andrea, point of clarification on the heights, say for the 3-story building in front.
Mm-hmm.
It's measured to the peak. Then the base is measured from what, the 4 corners of the building, or what? At the average of the 4 corners?
Yes, so we would take 4 measurements, and for each, with a building that has 4 sides. And so let's take, for example, the facade that you see here at the end of the building. So you would, just like you said, you would take the height at one side of the building and the other side, and you would determine what the average grade is at that point. And then from that grade point, you would measure up to the peak of the roof.
Okay.
So it's really all about grade.
Good. Page 14, or throughout the report, the Arapahoe facility talks about not changing the use, increasing the buildings, et cetera. But it also, page 14 talks about 10 feet side setback. But then I look at table 2, scroll and find it. There it is. Table 2 calls for building setbacks from property line. 10 feet is existing, and then all of a sudden it goes to 0 feet.
You know, I think that's, if you see the 1 above it, I think, fortunately, it was a
misplaced
a
1.
A misplaced 1, yes. Apologize for that.
Okay, got it. Then the remaining, it talks about unobstructed open space, 50%, it's going down to 30%. Why is that?
The applicant can speak to this, but I believe that, you know, as an institution, and many institutions, they like the opportunity to be able to expand. And so they were looking at reducing the open space, and they also, in conjunction with that, have proposed that instead of having a 40-foot building setback from Santa Fe, to increase that to 80 feet.
But throughout the report, it talks about not adding any square footage, change of use, nothing. But then again, the unobstructed open space goes way down.
Yes.
Things don't jibe here in staff report versus applicant statement.
So I would say that in conjunction with this application, we have not understood that there will be any development pending on the site. In terms of a long-term approach to how they may want to develop their facility, I think they can speak to that, and what the reason for the decrease in open space.
Let's see, a minor point. They talked about the zoning changes. The houses remaining, let's say the houses remain on the site for a year while they're preparing to build. They talked about not non-conforming, basically, and I think the point is, wouldn't they be grandfathered in until they build?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
that non-conforming, that threat doesn't exist. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. You weren't around, but do you have a feel for the purpose of Vinewood in the first place? Was it just to access this little sliver of site here? There was never the intent to take that access road across Lee Gulch. That was strongly urged not to do it in the Santa Fe corridor study. But anyway, what's the purpose of Vinewood?
That is a good question, and we do a lot of new people and staff, and there was some discussion about that early in the process. And in fact, we talked about a couple of different scenarios, but it wasn't necessarily unknown what the history behind Vinewood was.
I assume then there's no gate or anything across there to be cut by the fire department. It's a full access road into the Sutton property?
Not currently.
No, not currently.
No, but
proposed.
Yes, if implemented, yes.
Stop sign and barriers.
The barricade would come down and access will be given through.
Okay. And then I vaguely remember, last question, they talked about a future access to the river. Would it be from the Sutton site, or I see nothing on plans, but was that discussed? Is there a possibility that might happen?
From the Sutton property down to Mary Carter Greenway? Yes, we did have the conversation with South Suburban and did go back and forth on that a little bit. And the latest thinking was that given the use of garage condos and self-storage, and the desire of the city not to have the garage condos become a place to reside in, that perhaps a connection was better left not made.
Yeah, okay. I lied, one more. Let's see, I did a airport condo hangar at Centennial, and the owner came in and finished out a little second-story wet bar, and it was a place, it was party heaven. There wasn't any sleeping arrangements, but would that be possible with these condo units, according to the code? Or
Well, according to the code, it would be garage condos, and I suppose that a lounge area could indeed be considered, potentially, we'd have to work on this, an accessory use to that use.
they could do that?
Potentially, we would discuss
bathrooms,
that.
et cetera. Okay. That's all my questions. Anybody else?
Andrea, can you please just clarify planning area 1 and planning area 2 again for us? I think it's on the map.
Yes. Okay, I don't have it clearly on my presentation, but you look at the long rectangular parcel on the north, currently zoned RE. And actually, I apologize, I think we do actually have something here. There it is, okay. So that's the illustrative plan for the site plan. And planning area 2 is the garage condos that border on Mary Carter Greenway. And then you can kind of see a darkish red line that runs perpendicular or bifurcates the property. And on the east side is the PA1, planning area 1, which abuts, is adjacent to Santa Fe Drive.
What's the purpose of separating those into 2 separate planning areas?
Yes, the purpose was so that the garage condos would be a limited use. You may see that it's limited to 35 units, and it was the desire not to have that become entirely garage condos in the future. And likewise, the self-storage is the storage use that's allowed in PA1. So it's avoiding a larger area of just one type of storage use.
Anyone else?
I have one more. We talked about the heights of the various neighbors. Do you have setbacks of Breckenridge Brewery, the seminary, etc.? Any others?
I don't. Breckenridge Brewery, of course, is a larger site, and I don't have with me the information on what the required setbacks are. Of course, the actual setbacks are substantial.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Let's move on to applicant presentation. I assume
Chairman
they wish to speak.
Rudnicki, we do have one additional thing to offer. So we did receive one public comment in a written form, and so we'll be handing that out to you.
You have copies for all of us? When did this come in? Today?
A couple days ago.
Rather than pause like the last meeting, we will read on your own time while we do the applicant presentation. Give us a minute here, okay?
Are there 2 of them?
Just one page, right?
Pass those down, I guess.
Well, we got some extras here.
We're all covered.
Oh, this was in the packet. That was in the packet. This was in the packet.
Okay, don't forget to give your name, address, and who you work for, and all that good stuff.
Good evening. Lots to unpack here. Jessica Lizade on behalf of the applicant. I'm with Fairfield and Woods at 1801 California, Denver 80202. I'm here this evening on behalf of the applicant, Cornerstone. Storage, and Mr. Fred Gantz, who's behind me and willing and able and happy to answer any questions that you have. So, it's hard to get excited about storage, you think, but storage has changed a lot. So this evening, just 3 quick matters of business. The first is that I'd like to reserve some time, if needed at all, for some final comments. I'd also like to just draw your attention to one small correction to the staff report, which would be page 11 of 17, where it states if the city-owned open space parcel is not rezoned to open space, then the Santa Fe Arapahoe GPDP will not comply with the minimum freestanding zone district, and that's incorrect. It will comply. It will leave a city parcel that does not comply, just for the record. And I would also like to direct your attention to the traffic number that was provided in the staff report. That number is actually 342 from the traffic study itself. It says generate 342 daily weekday trips. I would bring your attention to that includes all 3 parcels, which includes Arapahoe County Mental Health. So just for you to know.
Okay. That's page 8 then. Okay.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, it's 300 and what?
342 daily trips, and that includes all of the trips from the Arapahoe County Mental Health Facility. And for future reference, they now go by All Health, so I'm going to refer to them as All Health. So we appreciate all of your careful detail. Clearly, you read your packets really thoroughly, and it makes our job good, and you're doing a great job for the citizens of Littleton. So a little bit about the applicant. Mr. Gantz in Cornerstone is a very experienced developer of self-storage. He has been in the business for many years, and he's actually well known in the business for investing a lot of money in his architecture. So what you see are 4-sided, very well-developed buildings, 75 facilities in over 15 states for a total of 4 million square feet. And those are just a couple of examples of some of the facilities. The facilities all meet architectural standards and are contextual to the areas that they're located. So a little bit about garage condominiums. I don't know how familiar you all are with them. In Littleton, generally I have to explain this concept in some fair depth. You actually have a facility here, a garage condominium storage here in Littleton, and it's by the very same garage condo partner, Mr. Glenn McWilliams, who's also here this evening, and he's happy to answer any questions that you have. So as they imply, garage condominiums are individually owned. These are purchased and customized by the owners who essentially have expensive toys and not a whole lot of room to store them, and it doesn't make sense for them to pay for long-term storage, and there's a better and more efficient use of space to do it this way. For the most part, they are a higher income, highly responsible demographic who it is not by any means a party scene, and more importantly, lest you have any concerns that the zoning requirements and that your general ordinances wouldn't control that, there is a set of decks or condo decks, if you will, and CC&Rs that will keep contractually these owners to a very high set of conduct. It prohibits in every way, shape, or form residential use of the site, overnight stays in the site, marijuana of any kind on the site, in the site, stored in the site, lest that be a concern. And these owners want to protect their own property and the integrity of the facility. So it's very highly market driven. So why Littleton? You all hear the demo speech on a regular basis. I don't have to tell you that part. A community that is tending to downsize, but also younger community who is a burgeoning younger professional community, and we just don't want big houses. And so there's not the same kind of room to store toys. Littleton loves them. Littleton loves the outdoors. And there is a, sorry,
Excuse me.
No, it's okay. It's better you than me.
I got to put $20 into the kitty. It's called a fine.
So Cornerstone, like any good business, commissioned a professional demand analysis. And just for you to know, within a 3-mile radius, there is a demand for 305,000 square feet more than the existing supply as it stands today. So you could build a number of these facilities and it's not going to meet the demand. So why this site? Commissioner Stallman asked a question that made a lot of sense. How is it a correct utilization of the 180,000 square foot threshold to put these sorts of things together? And I would posit it's the only way that someone like Mr. Sutton can ever rezone his property, and quite frankly, that the city can benefit from that property improving or redeveloping. Otherwise, it's just a parcel that's forced to sit there forever with a state zoning on it, unless it was purchased by Arapahoe County Mental Health and redeveloped into a mental health facility. So highly underutilized, as you've heard, a super narrow configuration. If you'll take a look, across the street here, those are residential lots. That gives you an idea of just how narrow that site is. You're not fitting much on it. It's a difficult site to navigate. And it just so happens that storage works. It's an exceedingly low impact use that's supported by both adjacent neighbors, or certainly initially supported by both the Denver Seminary and supported by All Health. Initially, as a matter of fact, we talked to the Denver Seminary about joining with them in a PD. They were very excited about it. We entered into a contract, and unfortunately, that became untenable at a point where they were asking for a donation of a very large portion of the parcel, and that didn't work. So it works better for All Health, who also then has needs for parking in order for them to move forward. Also, for you to know, this consolidates a tricky entrance there. So rather than there being 3 points of entry, which is what would currently be permitted along Santa Fe, it consolidates it into one. And I also wanted to point out, All Health has no plans of expansion. This isn't a way for anyone to put expansion in under someone's nose. So if there is a concern, we can certainly talk about that with the numbers. It was just to try and have some kind of consistency throughout the plan. So over the course of the last 18 months, we've been working on developing this project in conjunction with the city and have made a whole lot of changes at the request of the city and our neighbors. So the site plan you've seen, the first is that the buildings were moved as far east as possible. The second is, however, I will tell you that that setback is actually farther than the barn that sits there currently. We also changed the architecture to match that urban-rural vernacular, reduced the size of the center building, completed the connection to Vinewood, although I'll admit, Mr. Chair, we had the same question you did about what Vinewood does, but we are complying. Provided a 100-foot setback, and consolidated the 3 access points as we'd said. So low impact use, actually transit-wise, it's one of the very lowest trip generators there is on a traffic generation table. Also really thoughtful design. So I'm gonna speak for a second to this height, because that's the elephant in the room. It freaked me out too. So just as a point of reference, I've been doing this for a while, including here in Littleton, and I worked on the GPDP for Nevada Place. And let me tell you, Nevada Place is 42 feet on the GPDP. And I believe that all the GPDPs that list the heights of the building, which is probably without measuring them, the only way that you could form an analysis about what surrounding heights are. But those heights, at least the one in Nevada Place, for example, which is 42 feet, was measured from grade to the midpoint of the high point. And so what we were asked to do, and I believe staff correctly is interpreting the code as it should be now, but the numbers that perhaps some of you have been on commission for a while are used to seeing, if we measured that way, this would be 42 feet, so that you know if we measured from grade to the midpoint of the high point. And we can get as low, I'm going to show you this. We can get as low as 35 feet if we just put a flat roof on it. The point was to create some architectural interest. And so when you have that peaked roof, you do get a considerable amount of height. So we talked about the limited uses by development area. It is strange, and I will give that to whichever one of the commissioners asked about sort of why do we have this hodgepodge of uses. We have this hodgepodge of uses because as the applicant, I represent a developer of storage and garage storage. But the owner, Mr. Sutton, who is really a cornerstone in this community, and that is his farm, and he's here tonight, he has seen lots of situations come and go. And he asked, and rightfully so, to have some precautionary uses put in so that if in the unlikely event the project was not developed as intended, then first of all, he would retain the RE use so that doesn't go away and his house doesn't become non-conforming at some point, and that some other uses that I'm imagining have expressed some interest could be negotiated on that site. I would posit to you that this evening, and I also included this in the justification packet, we are willing, as a condition of approval tonight, to waive that use, the warehouse use and the restaurant use, upon closing. So just so that if that gives anyone any level of comfort. Trail. Very important to us. So this is what you're going to see from the trail to give you an idea. And this is a highly rendered drawing for this stage, right? Usually in planning, we're not going to get this far. But we thought that it was important to show you. So along the back, there's no access. These are not doors. They're just windows. The entrances are all on the other side so that there's a pleasing aesthetic as you walk along the trail. This is what you see. We conducted neighborhood outreach. I talked to you about our outreach with both Denver Seminary and All Health. Also, interestingly enough, we held a meeting, and what do they say? You know, what happens if you hold a party and no one comes? That's what it looked like for 2 hours, and we waited. So it was a lovely facility. We should have invited some passersby. Not one person. I've been doing this a long time. Usually someone will straggle in, not one person. And let's see, the Kiowa issue, the Colorado Common Interest Communities issue that you had mentioned, I can assure you, like any commercial, this would be treated the same as any commercial condominium. Many of the strip centers and a lot of buildings that you see, as I'm sure you're well versed, are commercial condominiums. They don't impede into residential use. This is not a residential use. I should also say it is not that no businesses and no commercial uses in any operational sense will ever or could ever be run out of this facility. Let's see, obstructed views. There are no obstructed views. As a matter of fact, I think I included here. This is the view from the seminary. Now, this is not rendered in any way. It's a box. And this is just so that you can see, this is from exactly the same height on both sides, so you'll see over the tops of those buildings. Did I have anything else? I'm certain that there are several other things, but parking. The parking ratio is the same as required by Douglas County for a similar facility, which is pretty comparable, and they have not had need to increase the parking for those facilities. And I'd also like to point out, going back to the height issue one more time, that 51 feet, we may have misunderstood because we just took it head on. Our 51 feet is an honest, straightforward 51 feet. We're from grade to that peak. It is not an average of all four corners. Our engineer's here, she can speak to that, but it is from grade to peak, 51 feet. And I believe that's all. I welcome your questions, and I know that Mr. Gans does as well.
That's it for your presentation?
That's it.
Questions for the applicant? Start this side.
And I may hand off if you're okay with that.
That's fine, as long as they come up, they speak at the microphone.
Where I'm going to start is with a little history on South Platte River. So after the flood in the early 60s, the Army Corps of Engineers proposed to riprap all through South Platte Park. And we had a city council and a mayor at that time that were opposed to that process. And fortunately to their vision on the South Platte River, there's a natural river corridor in South Platte Park, which starts at C-470 near there and then ends about Breckenridge Brewery at Reynolds Landing, which is just visible from the property. And then from below Reynolds Landing, the Army Corps of Engineers was able to riprap the sides of the river. So because of that early vision with some of our founding fathers for the city, they were able to preserve that as a natural river corridor. Unfortunately, there's riprap going further down, all the way down to Denver. There's a huge effort now to restore the river corridor and fix some of the damage that the Army Corps of Engineers has done, channelize the river, make it straight so it just conveys water downstream. They're rechannelizing for wildlife and for recreational use. So there's been about $3 million, I think, spent from C-470 down to Reynolds Landing. There's plans for redoing those 2 rapids at Reynolds Landing. They're currently acquiring funding for Union Rapids. There's like 5 rapids. And then most people have heard that they've spent several $1 million at Oxford Avenue creating a river surfing park. So that was a huge benefit to the community. And it's a different way of looking at the river. So I've heard from staff and from developer, about the rear of the lot being Santa Fe and the front of the rear of the lot being the river and the front of the lot being Santa Fe. The new way to look at the river is the front of the lot is the river and the rear is Santa Fe. So what are the opportunities that have been missed in the past and those that have been gained? In the past, we have Aspen Grove, which kind of blocked off the river, and it has poor connectivity to the river. So that was kind of a missed opportunity for a pretty nice development. Riverside Downs, also kind of poor connectivity to the river. So forward-looking communities, such as I believe Littleton is, look for ways to develop along the river in a way that increases connectivity to the river and community use of the river. And some of those, I mentioned that South Platte Park preservation by City Council in the 60s, the river channelization. We've also had recently South Platte River 56 development at the corner of Bellevue and South Platte River, which is multifamily use right along the river, perfect residential use, creates opportunities, connectivity to the river, and use for the community, and enhances that property for the community. Other opportunities, Walmart was going to go in, I believe, was that at Breckenridge Brewery property?
Yes.
That did not get approved, and we approved the Breckenridge Brewery, which has great connectivity to the river, some open space, and an example of good community planning, I believe. I also mentioned the ongoing South Platte Working Group, acquiring funds for redevelopment of the river channel for recreation. I think it's primarily for wildlife, but it also has a huge recreation component, and River Run Park at Oxford, which is creating a surfing community here in Denver. So there's a lot of communities that really have a vision for a river And I believe Littleton has one of its, in its comp plan, treat the South Platte River corridor as its most important asset. And I'm not opposed to redevelopment or rezoning of this property per se, but to go to industrial is exactly what, as a forward-looking planning commission, we shouldn't be doing. We should be looking at opportunities to increase community use and connectivity, perhaps in other types of residential uses, combining the two properties in a way for a different type of development. But to put garage condos right on the river, I think is not good planning at all, and I'm not going to support the project.
This is a time for questions to the applicant, not summations. Could we keep the summations to the end when we have our discussion and we have a motion? Questions for the applicant, please.
My question then is, have you looked at the South Platte Working Group plan and its recommendation, which is summarized in page 24? Our community's views of the value of rivers has since evolved, and now they are seen as amenities and desirable locations for retail businesses and residential locations. We see this changing view along South Platte, and we expect that further evolution will occur over time. The challenge is to encourage more riverly and river-oriented development and to create a planning, regulatory, and development environment that encourages this to proceed in an orderly fashion.
So I appreciate your comments, Commissioner, and I would respectfully disagree. I think that I agree entirely with you that that is the overall vision. I think that there are a number of sites that are absolutely suitable for the kind of development that you're talking about. This particular site is not one of them. It is limited in a number of aspects. I draw your attention to several other sites along the corridor that are equal. For example, I think there's a landscaping company right next to the Breckenridge Brewery that's highly industrial in use, that's appropriate for the site, and that works well where it is. So that's all I would have to respectfully offer. I would also say that we very thoughtfully and carefully looked at creating an undulating architecture, a residential look and feel along the back instead of high massing or something that did not look and feel residential or that didn't look and feel like it was accessible. I can speak on behalf of the applicant. We would love to have open connectivity and create an open space and a gathering space and a fire pit on a concern, and I believe perhaps a misplaced misconception about what in fact this product is. We're trying to be respectful of the city's concerns in that regard, but we would certainly welcome any opportunity for connectivity that we were availed.
So I still am just so curious about the proposed uses.
Yes.
And I hope that you'll ask your question about the reduction from 50% to 30% open space. I'm curious about that too, but I'd love to hear from the applicant long-term vision for the site. I know there are some developers who are into self-storage as a way to sort of inexpensively park land for a higher and better use later. Seems like selling off condominium garages will preserve the use for a longer period of time, but can you please just share your long-term vision for the combined site?
Absolutely. My name is Fred Gans, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, from Dallas, Texas, and...
Could you speak
yes.
to the microphone? Thank you.
You can move that, yeah.
I've been in the self-storage business since the early 80s, and obviously you all have seen the transition and change and the growth of this industry and the quality of what's being developed today versus what was even being built just 10 years ago. That structure that you're seeing there is an $8.5 million facility just for the self-storage portion of it. There is no land banking. Land banking was what Public Storage used to raise investor equity to go out and build and buy storage. That's a thing of the past. It's rare that you can find a piece of dirt that you would want to tear a self-storage facility down like this that would have a higher and better use. So there is no long-term plan to do anything different. And the quality of what we're proposing here is going to be very long-lasting. And as far as the height is concerned, these are elevations. These architectural drawings are not complete. We've had to go to this extreme or this extent thus far, even before we get here tonight, so that we can evidence to you what we're proposing to do. That roof is typically on every other facility that we've built just like it, 42 feet at its highest point. But because we've tried to adhere to this vernacular, agricultural, rural, architectural style, which when I first heard that term, I didn't know what the heck they were talking about. But we've worked real hard at meeting that, and as a result, we've ended up with some peaks that are higher than the norm. That can be fixed. That can be changed. Those can be reduced. We can bring those down. It's not impossible at all, you know, because we're trying to blend in. We're trying to do what we've been asked to do. We've been working on this for 16 months. We're way into this. We've made so many concessions and adjustments and modifications in all regards: architectural, engineering, setbacks off the rear. We're 150 feet from the rear property line. You know, we've done everything we can to comply with trying to preserve the feel of the bike path and the riverfront. You know, and the architectural style of the facility and the buildings that we're talking about is you just don't find any better in our industry. And our industry is retail. It's not industrial. Believe me, we're in the retail business. We don't sell burgers, we sell space. And that's what we do, and we do it well. And we need locations like this. And I've built 76 facilities in 15 states, and this is the quality of the type of locations we look for because we're a good fit. It's a bowling alley. It's 208 feet deep by over 1,000 feet deep. There's just not a whole lot of latitude of what you can do with that dirt, in my opinion. But
Thank you.
David?
All right. How many square feet are in the building, the main storage building?
107,000 square feet.
And was it 800 units? Or how many units?
About 700.
700, okay.
Yeah.
And how much parking were you proposing for the, do you remember?
Each code, you know, we generally only need about 7 parking spaces at all of our facilities. And we're building. Excuse me?
7 spaces total?
7 spaces for the office and the rental. We always have parallel parking outside the fire lanes and the drives just to meet different city municipality codes and requirements.
Yeah.
But our parking is never much more than 25 or 30 total.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly what we've got. About 30. Yeah, it's very sufficient.
Yeah, I guess I would be concerned about having too much parking because one of my concerns is we talked about no overnight stays, no residential uses. Is there anything in the condo docks or proposed condo docks or for other facilities that you have that limit noise and residents or owners having parties, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. The condo dock declarations, and I'm the self-storage guy. He's the condo garage guy, but I built condo storage in Texas, and I'm building one here in Lakewood. So I know the product and I understand the product, and our condo docks are that thick, and they're very restrictive, and the rules and regulations and bylaws address all the things you're referring to. Glenn.
Okay.
My name's Glenn McWilliams. I'm at 7017 South Owen Street in Littleton. The condominium declarations, in fact, state no business uses, no customers, no employees, no signage. So you could imagine if you're a business owner, you can't have customers come and go, you can't have employees there, can't have any signage, you really can't run a business. So that's one of our main requirements. There are all kinds of things about prohibitions about hazardous materials and the marijuana thing. I mean, you can hardly even look at it according to our condominium declaration. Can't package it, can't grow it, can't smoke it, can't do anything like that. There were some other questions about those commercial uses, and that pretty much addresses that. There was a question about a lounge or something like that, and people certainly could have a couch or something in their unit, but they're not allowed to live in the units. We have very specific regulations about that. And because this is an owned facility, there's a pride of ownership that goes with that, and people tend to respect that and take care of it and look out for the whole facility, not just their own property. And sorry, one more thing I wanted to add. Yes, we were sort of couched into this this industrial moniker, but it's really not an industrial use. These garage condos are owned by citizens of Littleton and the surrounding areas. They're just residents that have usually an RV, a boat, or a car collection or something like that, and they need a larger space to keep and care for those things. So it's not a business, it's not, and in fact, those very people would walk or bike through a connection to the path to Breckenridge Brewery to enjoy a lunch, or up to Hudson Gardens to enjoy a concert in the summer or something like that. So I think the group of owners there would use and enjoy that river as much as any residential people would, but instead of living there at night, they're only visiting it during the day. So I think it's still residents, Littleton residents and surrounding area residents using and enjoying that river. So I hate to have you think of it as an industrial use that backs up to the river. If you look at that, sorry, one more thing. If you look at that elevation or that perspective view that we put together, you see all the glass in the back. That's so that those unit owners can enjoy the river and the trail.
While you're up here, did I hear you have another project in Littleton?
Yes.
Can you speak to that, your experience with it? Is it similar in design? And where is it?
I think it looks great, but I would say that it's not as beautiful as this one's going to be. Mm-hmm. We're over in the Broadway Industrial Park, which is just off of Broadway on Grant Way, just south of the hospital, north of AutoNation Ford and County Line Road. Mm-hmm. We're in an industrial park, but it's still the same kind of use, same kind of owners and uses inside the spaces. And yeah, 100% sold out. Not quite built, but sold out.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to ask about the building heights as well. You clarified that the height is 51 feet total. That's the highest point from any point on the building. So if the building on the west side, being a grade that's sloping towards the river, if that height is 51 feet, then back towards the east, it's less than 51 feet.
That's only on the three-story building.
On the
height on the garage on the back is only 32.
32, right. Max. Yeah, I guess I'm talking about either way, just the general height of the buildings, whatever the max height is. So I guess the other kind of similar question is, are you building the larger building, a third-story building on a flat site or terracing it? I'm not sure about the grade.
There's 2 drops in that slab that are only 12 inches. So it's a relatively flat side. It drops off from the very front, and then it just kind of levels out. And then all the grade change is picked up where there's an existing house right now, and I think we're picking up 14 feet of grade change in one location between the 2 uses.
Okay, so on the lowest elevation section, that's going to be a height of 51 feet, and then going presumably east, that height's going to be lower because it'll be by however many feet.
It gets lower as you go west.
As you go west.
It's higher on Santa Fe.
Okay.
And drops down as you go back.
Okay.
Right where the 2 uses separate.
Right.
There's a big drop. It's about 15 feet.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying.
And we're doing a retaining wall there and dropping his development all the way down.
Down. Okay.
So it'll be at a totally different grade than the front piece.
Okay. And then can you just speak quickly? I'm sure other people are going to ask the same question, but the open space is a concern of mine, just along just having adequate buffering between both the Mary Carter Greenway and the Lee Gulch open space. And I would agree that I would be opposed to putting a connection from your property to the Mary Carter. There's already the Lee Gulch. We don't need people running back and forth between the trail and the property. But Can you kind of speak to that or that your property lines where it meets open space, I guess?
Make sure I don't misstate anything. Okay, because my engineer's here, so if I misstate something, she'll correct me. But we originally had 40,000 feet of garage condos on that back 2 acres. And it got reduced, and I think it's right at 30, less than 30,000 feet now, because they pushed us back from the river another 100 feet. So I think we're 150 feet off the property line, and then beyond the property line, you've got floodway. So I don't know how much more depth there is, but we're as far away from the river as we could get and still get enough building area to make economic sense.
Mm-hmm.
It just wouldn't work any smaller.
Yeah. And on the south side of the south property line where there's supposedly 10 feet of setback?
That's between Arapahoe County Mental Health.
Well, further west where it actually meets up with the overlook open space?
It's all open space back there.
Yeah.
So we're just connecting with open space, so.
Right.
So I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm concerned about the buffering between your property and the open space.
I see.
And somebody who's walking along the Lee Gulch Trail, seeing your property as an eyesore, how are you mitigating that?
I'll just say that our building that's closest to that property line is 20 feet. One is 20 feet away, one's 30 feet away, 32 feet away almost. And I don't know that someone's perception from the Lee Gulch Trail, they wouldn't necessarily know where the property line is and how close the building is to that, because there'd be, I think it's almost 100 feet of open space. Yeah, so I'm almost saying that the buffering is the open space, but if you, and I don't know if this helps any at all, but if you were to see the Lee Gulch Trail here, down here, you've got all this, almost 200 feet.
Sir, we have an overhead that will help you put that up on.
Look at that.
Thank you. Whoops, flip it around.
Yeah, you're there.
Hey.
No, it would help.
We do things a little differently here in Littleton.
Okay, there, Lee Gulch Trail, you can see there.
Right.
There, if our property is 200 feet, 208, 204, whatever that is, across there, you can see that from Lee Gulch Trail to the property line is about 200 feet. About the same. So if someone's walking on Lee Gulch Trail, we're further away than that barn is now.
That's right.
And they would see 200 feet of trees and grass before they'd see, plus another 20 feet before they'd see our building. So I guess I don't know. I mean, if there was something that delineated that property line and then they thought 20 feet was too close for some reason, in addition to the 200 feet they were looking through, we might be perceived as being too close, but I think 220 feet is probably adequate for a buffer from the trail.
Okay, and I mean, along the property line, it was stated that you were going to have a fence along that line. Is it a architectural fence? Is it chain link or?
No, it's a aluminum. Looks like wrought iron.
Okay.
Decorative.
And
but not opaque like we are on the north side.
Right. And then you have some landscaping and like a 4-foot section. Okay. Thanks.
Rather than you always being last, why don't you go next?
May I address the parking issue that's been brought up? Because, or should I just let him go?
That okay?
I've been doing this for 30 years. Built almost 5 million square feet of self-storage. That facility is not going to get 40 pieces of traffic a day. You can get a traffic study and you can pay these guys the big bucks and they can tell you what you want to hear, but there is no way that between our two uses, and I can't address the mental health because I don't know what their traffic, they have a parking problem. But between the two uses, if we generate more than 50 pieces of traffic a day, I'll be shocked. I wish it was 342. If it was, our business would be doing even better than it does. But that's not reality, for what it's worth.
Good. Questions for the applicant?
So couple of things that I appreciate about this is that condensing the entrances on Santa Fe, that I hope you guys carry through with, because that would be excellent. I also appreciate lowering the building height to preserve the neighbor's view, because our views are very important to us here, and that's very strongly in our comp plan. The storage uses do seem appropriate for this location. I appreciate the architecture, and I don't see the height as an issue, because I'd actually talked to Andrea about this, and it's the design standards, and to have a flat roof there, it wouldn't meet it. It would. It's nicer with it, even though it does make it look like a little freaky at first. But once you get through the freak out, it's okay. So here are my concerns with this. Having to do with the additional usage. You know, when we look at 10-2-23, we're required to have a concept design, which you have done for the storage. But the additional usage, restaurants and wholesale and having the other health facilities, there's no concept design.
That's not our deal.
I agree with you, but you're here, so I'm speaking to you.
If you need to speak, you need to speak in the microphone, please.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Me too. I understand the owner's concerns about that, but because his property will always be conforming, because it allows the houses to stay, I do not believe it is a good idea to have those extra uses on there. We have no concept plan. There's only 15, maybe 20% open space. The setbacks are short. I think we could find ourselves with a situation that would not benefit the city of Littleton if we kept those additional usage outside of specifically putting storage, the rentals up front, and the condos in the back. That's, I just don't think that's a good idea to add the additional usages. If for some reason this fell through and he wanted to do something else with those, he could go through the process to get those and have a design concept presented so we could see how that would look and how that would benefit the city of Littleton. Moving on from that, I'm looking at the land use table. And so in Littleton, when we have rental units, we're only allowing about 35% maximum for the buildings, and this has 50%. I was just hoping you could speak to that.
Amy? We 50%.
Jamie Overgard, Lend Partnership, 14632 West Auburn Court, Lakewood, Colorado, civil engineer on the project. What we did is we took our square footage of our buildings, of course, and then we calculated the use or the FAR for the building, and we came up with what the actual buildings are. So for the self-storage, it is at about 50%, and for the garage condos, it is at, it's hard to see. It is a lower, it's, where's that at? Yeah, 41, sorry. Thank you. So we based it on what was actually what we're proposing to do. So that's where we came up with those numbers.
Okay. This goes back to some of my concerns about the open space, particularly the setback, not on the north side, but on the south side. So I'll get into that a little bit in just a sec.
If I may add to that comment, please. When we dramatically increased the setbacks, I think the original was 25, now we're at 100. It squished me into a smaller buildable area where, in order to get the square footage, again, to justify the cost of the land, that's the square footage that we ended up making.
I'll ask you again to speak into the microphone. You're speaking to an audience.
Okay.
You're speaking to us.
Okay, that does explain more why it's so much more dramatic than what we normally allow here in Littleton. So looking at the open space change from the 50 to 30% on the, let's see, you're calling it the All Health Project. My concern with changing that open space, again, has to do with Lee Gulch. So if you look at the bridge house, which is there right now, there's absolutely no screening between the bridge house and the actual trail itself. And that, the building's spread across that whole property. It's a lovely building and nothing with that. But if at any point they lowered the open space, it's going to encroach upon the trail and the visual acuity of that. I think and we've talked about all our different standards that say we have to protect the river. I don't want to, I can read you the list again if you like,
Sure.
but we've all heard them.
No, I agree.
I don't think that decreasing the open space fits with how we're trying to protect Lee Gulch. And anyone who walks through there and walks by that building, if you added on more to that and the space going anywhere, you can't have a building closer than 75 feet to the trail right now. So if you added more, if it condensed the building at all, I just think that would go against trying to keep that open space and that trail, for what our, did you have something?
I was just going to comment. So we were taking a look, and you do try and flesh out all of these things and what seems like to us to be continuity or something that we've done to simplify reading or for the reader. And then we hear from people who know how to take a look at this critically, and we recognize the error. So I can tell you, we just kept the number consistent across the board so that the PD was consistent. We are happy to leave the Arapahoe County Mental Health land use portion, so that is planning area B. Planning area B can retain the original 50%. It doesn't have to be 30%. We just did that for continuity. So if you would like to make that as a condition of approval, we're happy to accept that.
I would just suggest that that be done.
We have time for amendments to the main
Right,
motion?
but I can't make them. I can't make amendments.
Okay,
Only you guys
but
can. So
they
that's
can
why
happen
I'm
then.
making my point here to you
Okay.
guys. I can't do that.
Questions for the applicant, please?
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, I do. I'm just
Okay.
reading my notes. I'm sorry. That's it for that. Okay. So in the justification letter, a couple of times the comment is made that one of the benefits is increasing sales tax revenue when unit owners residing in the surrounding jurisdictions buy a big ticket item and have them delivered to their unit. I'm guessing with your extreme your experience with this, you probably have studies showing how this is, and I was curious, how often does that really happen, and how could that truly benefit our sales tax revenues?
Not my comment, but
And this is Glenn McWilliams. So I can't say that I have studies that back that, but we've built these facilities. Here in Colorado, I've built on my 7th, 8th, and 9th facilities right now. And when these garages are built, owners suddenly need shelving units and workbenches and car lifts and all manner of air compressors and tool chests and all those kinds of things. And they do buy. I find all the big old cardboard in the trash cans and move it over to the recycling. So I know that these things happen just from personal experience. I can't say that I can pull out a study that shows how much that is, but it does happen. There are all manner of things that get purchased for these units.
Great. Well, thank you. This is just kind of dovetailing on what John was saying and what Dave was saying again about the screening from Lee Gulch and also from the Platte River. When you're walking down the trail and that open space that was mentioned, you can see the metal barns, and they're definitely there. And when you are from the Platte, not so much, but from Lee Gulch, you can. And so I'm curious, what color were you thinking of painting them? Or having I'm just wondering, because in the picture illustrative, you have green, and, well, green hides itself more.
yeah, believe me, the architect just pulled that out because we're going to go into the site plan and elevations approval stage, and that's going to get addressed in a separate process and hearing. I don't think that's what we're trying to accomplish tonight, but we're open. I mean, everything we've done architecturally thus far is based on feedback and input that we've been given by the city. We're trying to comply. We're trying to fit in with the brewery, okay, and that whole architectural urban vernacular. So if there's a better color or way to do it, we're very open to it, because I've never built a facility that looks like this, but I like it. I like it very much. And if it works out as well as I hope it will, I hope we can be doing more of them. I really do.
So when I go to the Platte River, you know, there's from Mary Carter Greenway, then there's that steep incline.
Yeah.
And then the property levels out. And it kind of overwhelms that little area. And my concern is when you have the building being the condo garage there is going to basically go across almost all of that 200 feet. Not quite, obviously, because of the roads on the, again, that's a pretty big, long building. It's 32 feet high. It's noticeable. I'm just really concerned about just keeping some kind of screening. You know, the 50 feet, you say that you're about 150 feet
right.
Away, maybe even increasing the setback to 100, since obviously that's not going to affect what you're building because it's already 150 feet back.
Well, there's a limitation, and the reason that building is where it is because there's a 50-foot easement. Oh, it is 20? What kind of easement is that? Sanitary sewer, that they were trying to get us as far away as we possibly could, so we went across the easement that we couldn't build on, and that's where that building has landed.
And it's a good place for the building. Like you said, it is farther back.
Yeah.
Taking enough, that right now there's several existing trees that are mature. Are you guys going to be keeping those?
I sure hope so. I mean, we'll do everything we can to preserve the green space there,
Yeah,
no question.
That's actually part of the design standard in there about preserving the trees.
Absolutely.
You know, as long as it's possible. Again, just creating as much screening to keep it green, and so when you're going down, especially as a walker, I walk it, I don't bike it. You're looking around, you're seeing things. A building that's 160 feet long, 32 high, you see those types of things, and so it needs to be done in a manner where...
And again, Glenn, I'm not going to speak for you, but that building doesn't need to be 32 feet tall. It's again because of that articulation and the vernacular architecture that you get those peaks. So in the redesign or the approval of the elevations and ultimate site plan, that can be lowered. We're open to that. We really are.
I actually don't have a problem with the height, because if you take it away, you get rid of the peaks, and that actually makes it, well, it's a matter of opinion, but for what we're looking for, it takes away from what the design standards are asking you to do.
That's
so
right.
My only comment is it's a long building, and then with the height, it's big. And just keeping it screened. The biggest thing is screening Lee Gulch, screening the Platte River.
I agree with you.
And again, no problem with the usages, don't have a problem with the heights. It's screening. And my concern on the Lee Gulch side, with only 4 feet, it's hard to screen.
Yeah.
Hence maybe a green color.
You know, the GDP process that you do here is different than the SUP process I'm typically accustomed to, where we come in and we have a site plan specific, and we have to build exactly what we say we're going to build with no variance whatsoever. And it doesn't affect all the other uses. That's the only thing we can build. So as far as these other uses are concerned, I mean, we're very open to resolving those concerns and making those a non-issue.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jason?
The applicant actually addressed my comments or questions during some of the other answers. Thank you.
Okay.
Lynn?
I don't have any questions.
You good?
Two questions. You mentioned, well, the main line, the sewer line runs to the west. You guys are going to have to tap, right? There's going to be some sort of water and tap fee involved with this whole thing?
Yes.
Okay, and not each individual unit, but mainly just the office?
For the self-storage, yes. For the condo storage, no. Each unit will have its own.
Will have a tap?
Water.
No, and a sewer? Yeah.
Each building, I'm sorry, yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, my
Okay,
mistake.
all right, good.
About got in trouble, didn't I?
Yeah, no worries. The other thing I wanted to ask you is this. In the context, very briefly, is in order to effectuate a rezone, we need to verify compliance with the comp plan, which you're aware of.
Yep.
And in the absence of such compliance, then there has to be either an error in the original map or change in changing conditions. A lot of what goes into the comp plan or the citywide plan involves how we envision the community. A storage facility, if we didn't have any, would theoretically be something that the community might use to its advantage. But we've had this conversation amongst the community for a while, for example, with regard to apartments, because there's been a lot of apartments built on the periphery and some on the interior of the community. And the question that ultimately gets boiled down to is, when do we have enough apartments? I just did a quick and dirty Google search, and as far as I can tell, there's about 11 self-storage units, and they are Extra Storage, CubeSmart, Public Storage, County Line, and then there's probably 2x that number, or another 1x that number in proximity in Highlands Ranch, Jeffco, Centennial, Denver, so forth and so on. There's a lot of storage, mini storage-ish, in and around the area. The other thing I'm aware of, and for full disclosure, it's because my wife owns 80 shares of Public Storage in her IRA. So I actually listened to their analyst call for the second quarter. They actually said Denver's a soft market for them pricing-wise because there's too much supply. So my question to you guys is, if we're doing more of what's already in the community, broadly construed, you know, within a few miles of the city borders, and there seems to be evidence of some sort that there might be some level of a surplus of this kind of thing, why do we need more, and why do we need it in this space, which is close to what arguably is one of the quote-unquote crown jewels of the community, which is the South Platte River Park? Please.
Question. There's 10 facilities in my 3-mile trade area, okay? Because that's how we analyze.
We approved one more 2 weeks ago at Norgren. Okay,
That would be the 11th.
There you go.
But that's being promoted. There's not a sponsor behind that development, so I'm hoping it doesn't happen. I am.
We don't want another hearing for the
interesting.
same site, please. It's a long one.
We can't do too many of these.
Yeah. If you look at this location, and believe me, I've built in 15 states and I've analyzed so many sites, we have zero competition within a 2-mile radius. That's unheard of. There's not one facility within a 2-mile concentric circle. I own that circle predominantly. I generally look at my 1.5 miles. If I own my 1.5 miles and I don't have any competition, I'm good, because based on the quality of what we develop and the quality of sites that we select, we'll succeed. And based on the demand at this location, and there was a reference to that I had a study commissioned.
Right.
I did my own study. I've always done my own studies. I've been mentored by 2 guys that have built 300 facilities ground up. And the demand is real. There's 300,000 plus excess demand. For me to get to 85%, I need to capture 72,000 square feet. I can do that in my sleep. That location is very viable, and it warrants this quality of development. It's on a busy street, and it's a location that just would be tremendous. It really would.
Okay, thanks much.
You bet.
Okay. Your perspective view of the back buildings closest to the river corridor is quite different from the general plan development plan that I'm looking at here. It shows the elevations. What are we going to build here? We're going to build that perspective, which is a pretty reasonable elevation, or are we doing the, kind of the hut-like structures I'm looking at the general plan development plan?
You'll have to forgive me, but I didn't understand the question.
Yeah. We had a perspective view of the back buildings, okay, closest to the Platte River.
Okay.
Showed the back view with the glass, a broken up facade, but then in the general plan development plan, I'm looking at fairly mundane, straightforward buildings. Which one are you building?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
We will be building exactly what you see in the illustrative.
Can you bring it up?
Yeah, that's what I'm working on. Right there.
That's what.
That's what we'll be building. And I'll explain the discrepancy. In putting well, it's not really a discrepancy. It's a difference in just getting height, basic figures so that you can see where the high points, low points, and some of the other information are contained within the GPDP. That was under a preliminary architect who was just providing some basics. This is based on an actual architectural rendering by the architect who will be designing the building.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Are 3 stories the norm for those type of taller buildings? Or
for the self-storage?
Yes.
Very much so.
So 3, you get into 4, it just be too much?
4, there's not very many people doing 4. You either see a combination of 2 and 1 or 3.
Okay.
And our original site plan had 2 and 1, and the 1 was on the back where the condo storage is.
Okay.
And they didn't want that much storage across the entire site, so we consolidated it to the front 2 acres for a 3-story and brought the condo garage use to the back.
Okay. Parallel parking, you'll have some parallel parking along the drives, is that what you were saying before?
That's what we normally do if we have a code with a city that requires more parking than the norm. I don't know if we're doing that here. We are? Yes.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Are there any other questions, the applicant? If nobody objects, before we go to the public comment stage, we'll take a 5-minute break. No more than 5 minutes, so we'll start in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
And I think I'm supposed to do that.
Thank you.
Let's get going here. We'll wait for.
Did you mess up a knee or something?
List of speakers here.
Wow.
Problem is I aggravated it too.
Is that right?
Made it worse.
Okay, can we have a seat, please? Okay, well, now we're entering the public comment of the hearing. Again, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Give your name, address, or your district number. Yellow card will be shown. Show up that yellow card there. Okay, with 30 seconds left, and red card when the 3 minutes is up. Please finish up then. Be civil, respectful. Let's get started. Nobody signed
and
up.
Mr. Chair, before we begin, slight point of clarification from applicant's presentation. Just before we go forward. So it's both staff and legal's position that anytime you do a rezoning, you cannot create a non-conforming parcel. In this instance, a non-conforming parcel will be created with the city's property that it owns, which is the reason why staff has recommended as a condition of this approval, if it was the board's pleasure to approve this application, that it be rezoned to open space. So while the applicant is correct that we'd be creating a non-conforming parcel for the city, is our perspective and belief that this application cannot go forward unless the city parcel is rezoned, which is reflected in the condition that we have suggested to you.
Okay, is there anybody that wishes to speak on this issue? Since nobody signed up. Pam?
I'm Pam Chepborn. I live in District 1, a block and a half from here. So the short story on this is it's too big for the site. It's simply too much for this place. If it was going to be approved in a smaller form with greater setbacks, that would be fine. But there's no obligation to rezone for economic profit by the owner or developer. There is no obligation on the city to do that. So we're free of that, of any of that kind of idea. Storage may have changed, that's great, but this would be great on another site in Littleton. And as the applicants pointed out, they're building in another site in Littleton, which is appropriate. This is not appropriate for this, as has been pointed out. And it's very interesting how staff interprets some paragraphs as paramount and others as maybe not as important, but the river. You folks are the ones who approved the plan that said the river is the main thing for Littleton. You approved that. I expect you to enforce it. This is not the right use or the right size for the site. So it's the setbacks that are part of the problem. 10 feet on the side is unacceptable, I think, and it cannot be adequately shielded or screened. It cannot be. That is too small of a space. Even in California, where I've seen a lot of this kind of development, it's not adequate. Also to the side where there's dorms, the dorms are 2-story and this is 3. And I'm sorry, but these people next door deserve more courtesy from you. New commercial development has to respect and be buffered from adjacent uses. This does not do that adequately. 10 feet doesn't give those people trying to sleep in those rooms adequate buffering. Boy, they mentioned air compressors, by the way, so how'd you like that next door? So the 10 feet side setbacks are not acceptable to me. The 50 feet setback from the trail, that's the important thing here, the trail. For that kind of look, that's not consistent. The other thing is the change in use. This used to be mostly fields. And I care about wildlife, and this will pretty much knock out any wildlife trying to survive along here. And that matters, I think. also, the staff should have supplied a grading plan. We had that for one of the Oak Brook developments, and we didn't have it at all for this. Staff should provide that. So this is too big for the site, and I ask you to disapprove it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak? Please, sir.
My name's Dan Arizumi. That isn't important. What is important is I represent the property owner, Gary Sutton. Gary's uncomfortable getting in front of in a public forum and speaking, so there he is, and I'm speaking on his behalf. I want to first say that I respectfully disagree with most of what the prior speakers have said about this property. Gary and I have spoken at great length about the development proposal in front of you tonight, and we evaluated it as the best opportunity, not only for Mr. Sutton, but for the Littleton community. And I submit that Gary's family has run Valley Feed and Supply continuously until 2015 for 80 years. Gary cares a lot about Littleton, almost as much about Littleton as he does his own well-being. Gary is completely and fully behind this project. He's been apprised of every step along the way of this vetting procedure since about April or May of 2015. This property has been, or this development has been planned, revised, revived, and revived. The revisions have to stop. Gary is kind of a victim of everybody else's development opportunity. Just by way of background, when Gary's parents originally bought this property, it was 17 acres, and now we're down to 4. Down to 4 acres. He wouldn't have to go through all this procedure, get Arapahoe Douglas Mental Health involved at all. He had as much land as he needed. But the United States Army Corps of Engineers took a great bunch of the property to expand the river, and this is what he's left with, 4 acres. It's approximately 200 feet wide by 1,000 feet deep. Everybody wants setbacks, but can you imagine if we implemented 50-foot setbacks on the north, 50-foot setbacks on the south? You know what you'd have? A bowling alley. Nobody would be able to do anything with this property. And with regard to making the Mary Carter Trail and the Lena Gulch Trail accessible to Littleton citizens, I fully submit that the people who are going to be buying the garage condominiums and who's going to lease space in the mini storage will be Littleton citizens too. So please support this project. It's very important.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then we will close the public, Ms. Hen? Yes, but I got to close. I'm sorry, do I close the public hearing before I get applicant response? Or if I can do whatever I want?
Applicant rebuttal, then close the public
sorry?
hearing. Applicant rebuttal, then close the public hearing.
Okay. Would the applicant like to respond to any of the public comment or make any last summations?
I'll spare you the summation. I think you've heard plenty, but I did have 2 just quick comments of points of clarification. The first is that measured from the ground to the midpoint of the high point of the roof, which is how the PD for Denver Seminary was approved, those would be at 48 plus feet according to that measurement. And on that end of the property, they're considerably higher than the buildings that are down there, just for your knowledge. The second is that I had submitted before we would leave at 50, we could leave the Arapahoe County Mental Health site at 50% open space and a quick back of the napkin to accommodate the additional parking that we had discussed for Arapahoe County Mental Health. We would need more like 40. So from 30% to 40%, but we couldn't give the full 50, otherwise there would be no way to accommodate the parking that's necessary for them, and also the reconfiguration of the driveway. Thank you all very much for your time this evening.
Thank you. We'll now close the public portion of the meeting. Do we need to vote on that? I don't remember. No, okay, great. Commissioner comments, motion, amendments? Who wants to start? Seeing no rush to speak, somebody needs to speak. Can we have a motion?
I'll, while Bruce is looking through his iPad, I'll say something quick. I think that there's advantages and disadvantages to this use and this property. I am grateful to the applicant for the design that they propose here. If especially looking at the slide that's up now, the garage condos. This presumably is the view from that you'd have from, say, the southwest corner of the property. And I like the way it's broken up. It doesn't look like one big mass building. Given the fact that that the open space is less, I'm a little, I don't like that so much, but I can understand the need for it. Denver Seminary to the north is 3 stories. The mental health property, they're on board with this presumably since they're part of this application. So I also did a quick survey of surrounding self-storage between Highlands Ranch and Hampton Avenue, and the vacancy rate is 0.1%, 1.7 million square feet of self-storage, and there's roughly 1,000 square feet that's vacant. So there's definitely a need for this type of use. It seems to fit the area. The fact that the applicant is trying to fit in with the existing buildings and the brewery, it seems to me that it'll make a nice corridor along that area from Brewery Lane north to Hudson Gardens. And I think that's it. I think that's my only comments.
I think we have a motion ready to roll.
All right, yeah. I move to approve Planning Commission Resolution 15-2017 concerning the Santa Fe and Arapahoe General Plan Development Plan located at 6505 through 6509 South Santa Fe Drive, which forwards a favorable recommendation to City Council with the following conditions. 1, that Resolution 16-2017 regarding the rezoning of the adjacent city-owned Lee Gulch Overlook property at 6591 South Santa Fe Drive is approved. 2, that no uses beyond storage and warehousing are included, so excluding, what do we say? Restaurant and...
Wholesale.
What was it?
Wholesale.
Wholesale, that's what I was thinking of, okay. Excluding those uses. And then 3rd, that the AMHC open space, AMHC parcel open space percentage is increased from 30% to 40%.
Chair Pro Tem Stallman, one quick note on that. We would need to have mental health, is this the existing use, included in that?
Yeah, so included. Yeah. So there'd be 4 conditions.
Question for clarification. Currently, the Arapahoe site has a 50% open space.
It's currently has 30.
No, they're asking for 30.
You're correct. I'm sorry. So I said 30 to. Let me friendly clarification then, from 50% to 40% as proposed.
And just for clarification, that would be 3 conditions by my count. 1 would be the open space, 2 would be the uses, and 3 would be the open space for the second parcel.
Just another clarification, you're,
I'm not going to repeat all this, just so you know.
We have it.
Good.
so currently it's 50%, they're asking for 30, you're compromising at 40.
40.
That's your intent?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Okay.
So we need a
So we have a second. We have a hand raised for a second. Lynn again? Thank you. Discussion? Go ahead.
Actually, I had a question, though, for the attorney. So does agree with you that the open space resolution, no other uses such as wholesale or restaurant, and then the 50 to 40% open space, but what about the AMHC continues with the current use? Is that not, that's also a condition though, right? So it'd be 4?
It's added in a 2. 2 is all the uses that are doable in this new combined parcel, correct?
Okay.
So it would be the wholesaling, the self-storage, the mental health.
And would you like Denise to read to you what the
Well, I think that would
motion on the floor?
probably be helpful. Yeah.
Clarify your own.
Clarify.
I know, I'm confused, so that's
Now,
fine.
speak slowly and clearly here. This is complicated.
All right, this is what I got. Let's see. To approve PC Resolution 15-2017 concerning the Santa Fe and Arapahoe General Plan Development Plan located at 6505 through 09 South Santa Fe Drive, which forwards a favorable recommendation to City Council with the following conditions. 1, that Resolution 16-2017 regarding the rezoning of the adjacent city-owned Lee Gulch Overlook property at 6591 South Santa Fe Drive is approved. 2, that no uses beyond storage, warehousing, and mental health are included, with restaurant and wholesale uses excluded. And 3, that the AMHC parcel open space percentage is increased from 30% to 40%.
50 down to 40.
Yeah, I think that the current percentage is 50 on open space, and they were going to take it to 30, so we're saying 40.
From 50% to 40%.
To 40%, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody clear?
Well, and just to clarify, Denise, the uses that are here on the table are self-storage, garage condos, treatment facilities, including housing. So you said warehousing?
So that would be helpful to clarify which of these uses are included versus excluded.
So to make it simple, we could, from this use table, exclude wholesale and restaurants.
Which is what we've done.
Yes, but she said warehousing, and that's not here, and I am not.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and amend it to clarify it that way?
So the second condition is that in the use table provided here, that wholesale and restaurants are stricken.
You want to do that as an amendment, or do you want to change your motion with the conditions?
Let me defer to the team.
I believe it would be easier if Commissioner Stallman just accepted
I have
that
no
as part of his
objections to
motion.
it if
Rather than voting on the main motion and amending
Sure.
the motion.
I have no objections if it's acceptable to proceed accordingly.
And then if your second also agrees with that.
I said, yes, I agree.
Thank you, that's a little bit easier.
So, sorry, but you're going to read this again with that change. Too bad. Go ahead.
Well, seems the only change there was that number 2, that no uses beyond self-storage, warehousing, and mental health are included, with restaurant and wholesale uses excluded.
Okay. Oh, because
But-
again, you said warehousing. It's garage condos.
Garage condos in place
So
of warehousing.
self-storage, garage condos, treatment facilities, including housing. Warehousing is not,
Right.
not a
Including
use.
housing.
Thank you.
I think I originally said warehousing, which is where it came
Oh,
from.
okay.
I misspoke.
Okay, so one last time, that no uses beyond self-storage, garage condos, treatment facilities, including housing, and mental health are included, with restaurant and wholesale uses excluded.
We got a thumbs up.
Yeah, we're good.
That the housing goes with the mental health, that it's not an option elsewhere.
Yeah, the existing houses would be a grandfathered use, but there wouldn't be any new residential, aside from those associated with their mental health.
That was my point, that they're grandfathered in even with the change of zoning.
Correct. We're not going to tear down the houses that are existing there.
Okay. Discussion, we can go around the table or let's start here.
I have nothing at this point. I think it's an excellent plan.
Andrew?
I struggle with this. The 51 feet, I don't like the height of that. It's taller than most everything down there, and I think a lot about the Littleton skyline, and I know a lot of people don't. Most people don't even probably think there is a Littleton skyline, but to me there is. And I see this as being another wall that goes up, and I'm not really that excited to see another wall go up in there. I certainly can appreciate the retail demand, and to think of storage as retail is sort of, I don't really do that, but I think of more of industrial. And as I think of the comp plan, and it says creative uses for retail, I said, well, maybe that is a creative use, and it wouldn't be the first time I've missed the boat on something, so maybe draw retail that will provide the goods needed and provide the goods needed and desired by residents while capturing retail sales from both residents and non-residents. So I see a definite benefit there in terms of adding a project like this. But that's kind of where it stops for me. And where the rest of it kicks in comes down to the comprehensive plan itself. And in outdoor Littleton, his first point, treat the South Platte River and tributaries as one of the city's most important access. It goes from natural areas to outdoor entertainment to active river-related opportunities to connections between downtown and river corridor. And in all of those cases, I don't see this as achieving that goal there. You know, part of me, and I understand construction defect law and how bizarre Colorado can be at times, I'd almost like to see more regular condos there, more regular activation, and actually people enjoy that area much more than a garage condo, which sounds like salespeople making up words to me. Also under transformative actions, then leaving the first part of the comp plan, getting to the second part, again, we're back to the river. Highlight the river and its riparian actors, conservation, set the stage for development, which is what we're talking about. But then it says, and there's a picture, and it says a few areas along the river close to downtown are appropriate for housing, retail, and entertainment uses. Development in appropriate locations along the river might look something like this. And there's a very activated picture of some architecture that is nondescript, and there's people moving around. And again, I'm back to, I just don't think that storage is the appropriate use along this corridor. I think that's 1964 thinking. I think that's turning your back to the river, which is exactly what we've just spent 3.5, 5 years going through and saying that's not what we're here to do. I do think the mental health facility could use some more parking. I think that a way should be made to make that happen. I do think the city should rezone the open space parcel that it owns to open space. That seems procedural. Let's go ahead and get that done. But in terms of storage being the best use, I don't think it's a creative use. I don't think it's an active use. I don't think I don't think warehouse districts belong next to rivers anymore. I don't think that when we're capitalizing and expanding the area, I don't think that that's getting that done. So I'm probably leaning against this. I believe the design is very nice. Architecturally, it's a very pretty design. I think it does fit, and thank you for admiring what we call the rural vernacular around here. We do appreciate that, but in terms of what I'm looking for in that area, it's just not there for me.
That's it. You want to go?
Sure. I likewise was trying to fit this into the criteria that we have to abide by in terms of effectuating a rezone. I mean, it's evidence-based. We have to hear the evidence. We have to make a decision on the basis of whether this is consistent with the comp plan. I think Andrew raises some valid points concerning the interfacing with the river. I think and I looked at the same documents as we're bound to do here in order to render a decision that's supported in law. We talk a lot about outdoor Littleton. We talk about a dynamic Littleton. We talk about connected Littleton. We talk about a distinctive Littleton. storage concept, just in a general sense, is tough to integrate within a lot of those attributes. And yet, and he brought up the transformative action number 2, which is a focus on the activity areas and the corridors. I think if you look at this project from the river, it's potentially a tough sell. On the other hand, if you look at it from Santa Fe is a major traffic thoroughfare. It's got a lot of, a massive amount of vehicular traffic on it. The structures and the types of businesses along Santa Fe, in some respects, actually do represent almost an industrial use. I mean, you've got the railroad on one side, and you've got things like Santa Fe Sand and Gravel. You've got the retail at Aspen Grove. You've got a big parking location at Monroe with the RTD lot, and so forth and so on. And yet the river has ended up being fairly protected and expanded and beautified and so forth and so on. I think when you look at this from a 200-foot frontage area, it's dramatically less frontage onto the river than, for example, the Seminary, which is blended in pretty well. Certainly Aspen Grove, which is now covered up by the Aspen Grove Apartments, and I'm not sure what their proper name is anymore, but I mean, the setbacks are farther, but the mass and building height, I think, is greater. And so there's a lot of give and take in here. I don't know that I find, based on the evidence that's been presented, that this is demonstrably inconsistent with what we're trying to accomplish. I think it probably is on balance, all in, fairly consistent with the comprehensive plan. There's arguments you can make either way, but I'm going to go ahead and find that it does comply with the comprehensive plan. And then consistently with the GPDP requirements as outlined in the staff memo, and I will support it accordingly. Thank you.
Dave?
I guess I made my comment. I'm good with it.
Okay.
I'm conflicted and undecided, but appreciate my colleagues' comments very much. I appreciate the presentation that you all made, very comprehensive as well.
Yeah, the developer's proposal is nicely prepared, and the building design is nicely rendered and attractive. However, as previously stated, there's just not good compliance with the comp plan, and in particularly the South Platte Working Group's vision for the South Platte River, which I think should be one of the overriding documents for this type of development, any kind of development that is fronting the South Platte River. And it was totally overlooked in both the staff plan and the developer's plan. And I think that's a disservice to the South Platte Working Group and all the effort that's gone in to transform the river. And I'm not going to support this.
No comment? Okay.
All right. One thing I reviewed was the South Platte Corridor design recommendations, which call for about 15 to 20% open space around the perimeter of lots. The applicants provided that in the ballpark with what they're proposing. They're providing significant architectural detail on the western elevations facing the Platte River. My concerns were about lighting and some of the uses on the garage condos. They've addressed some concerns I've actually experienced through zoning enforcement with these types where people were operating businesses out of the garage condos. The lighting's motion activated, it's away from the windows, and the windows are tinted. So the design elements come together nicely on this proposal.
Thank you. Like others have mentioned, I also struggled with this. project, let's start out, to me it's a given. The existing RE zoning is obsolete. It's obvious. And application asks for a change in zoning. If they had this as a use by right, they wouldn't be here. They would just apply for a permit to the Denver Zoning and Building Department and be on their merry way. But since they're asking for a change in zoning, that opens up the discussion to the public and to us for interpretation of how this complies with the comprehensive plan and the Santa Fe corridor plan. I was a little troubled by a little bit of cherry picking, I thought, when they needed to expand their site and include the mental health facility in order to meet the minimum requirement. I'm not so concerned about that anymore. And also it was mentioned to be legal. It also, Arapahoe Mental Health is, they're gaining from being included. They get that extra parking that they need and much better entry. I agree with the idea that we're going from 3 fairly bad entryways to 1 consolidated entryway. As far as consistency with the comprehensive plan, couple of quotes, raise the bar to increase the quality of community and economic development. This is a facility which, quite frankly, brings in little economic gain to the city. I think they've proven that it's needed. Long-term taxes coming into the city is fairly minimal. Second point, fostering a vibrant and evolving community. To me, and I mentioned this with the last case 2 weeks ago, storage is essentially a dead-end usage. It's not hardly vibrant. Needed, but hardly vibrant. With all that said, away the present obsolete zoning and the antiquated residential use within this usage, that's my struggle. It's a difficult lot, narrow lot, bowling alley, somebody mentioned, really doesn't have decent access. It's only a right in, right out. Street presence is very minimal. But on the other side, it's a site. The use here wastes a marvelous view to the Platte River, the Mary Carter Greenway, and the entire Front Range. It's a fantastic site. Finally, is the present single-family houses the highest and best use of this property? Obviously not. Is this storage facility the best use of this property? Not greatly. And quite frankly, I have no idea how I'm going to vote in the next 1 minute. So, any other comments? Seeing no, it's time to vote.
Not even a minute.
Struggling.
Less than a minute.
We are all set.
All right, that's 5-4 and 2 against, so the motion carries.
Thank you. Obviously, we're advisory to City Council, so enjoy your next stop.
Oh, that was warm and fuzzy.
I meant that in a nice way.
Yeah.
Okay, we're still conducting business, so if you could leave quietly, thank you. Next case should be fairly straightforward. PC Resolution 16-2017, a resolution recommending approval of the Lee Gulch Overlook Open Space and Trailhead Phase 1 rezoning from PDR to OS. Could we have a staff report, please?
Think about it longer.
What do we have here? A letter? Oh. Andrea, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Andrea Mimnall of the planning staff and have passed around a clean copy of a resolution, just an error in the one that was in your packet. The item that we are presenting now is a proposal to rezone a parcel within the Lee Gulch Overlook open space from PDR to open space. The process for this is in two pieces. The first is to come to the Planning Commission and get a recommendation. That recommendation is forwarded to council, and council is the decision maker on the rezoning. There is no other development anticipated with this planning process. We've been looking at a very similar map with the previous item, and so here you see the proposed or now recommended to council GPDP for Santa Fe Arapahoe, the two parcels on the north, and then the green one that is outlined in red is a subject parcel. It's 2.99 acres. It's owned by the city and has been a part of the assemblage of 7 parcels that make up the Lee Gulch open space for a number of years now. None of these parcels within the Lee Gulch open space have been rezoned to open space at this time, and the staff views this as phase 1 of a plan to rezone the Lee Gulch all as open space eventually. In fact, it is on Community Development's work plan. And in this slide, you can see a picture of this Riverbend Plaza GPDP. We discussed that a little bit the last time. The parcel shown in red is the AMHC parcel that may be rezoned as part of the new Santa Fe Arapahoe PD, and that leaves the city-owned open space as an undersized zone district within the PDR zone district. And now our zoning code, while it does require a threshold for a zoning district of 180,000 square feet, that applies to all zoning districts in the city except for open space. So open space can be a zone district of any size. And so if this property were to be rezoned open space, it would be in compliance with our zoning code should the Arapahoes or the Santa Fe Arapahoe GPDP be approved. The staff report addresses its consistency with a comprehensive plan, with the citywide plan and the Santa Fe corridor plan, and I've captured a few of these as part of the presentation. And the first one is Goal 2, an outdoor Littleton, which says to capitalize and expand on Littleton's most valuable outdoor resources, including the South Platte River and its tributaries. Make those resources as available to the public as possible while protecting and enhancing them. And the staff response to that is that Lee Gulch Overlook is a significant natural resource within the city that provides habitat for wildlife. Further, that the Lee Gulch Trail, which runs through the property, provides an east-west trail across the city that links to the Mary Carter Greenway. The rezoning of the subject parcel, Tract C, to the open space district will place the property in a zone district that is intended for open space and park uses rather than urban development, and as such will help to protect the park for years to come. And so with that, staff is recommending that the rezoning be approved, finding that it meets the criteria as consistent with the comp plan, and there is a resolution, revised resolution that was just passed around. It's number 16, 2007, and it reflects the staff recommendation. And I'm available for questions.
Questions of a technical nature for staff? Not even you? Anyone? I have nothing. Let's see, there's no applicant presentation. We'll now open it up to public comment. Nobody signed up. We don't, with it. Did I get that? Okay. You can just let me know any names. I'm sorry, you have to come down and speak, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, does anyone else wish to speak on this issue? Seeing no rush to the rostrum, any other comments from staff before we'll close the public hearing? We have a motion?
Sure.
You're the motion man tonight?
Apparently, yeah. Let's see here. I'm trying to integrate these two. So you want to read off this as opposed to what's in the packet?
So there are some sample motions in your staff report at the end of the staff report.
Yeah, and that's
So
looks to be a
right, the motion that Andrea handed out today, there was just a slight typo on the one in the packet. So the one you have in front of you just got rid of the typo in the title. So the motion is still the same.
okay. So all right. So I move to approve PC Resolution 16-2017 concerning Tract C Lee Gulch Overlook Open Space and Trailhead Phase 1 rezoning located at 6591 South Santa Fe Drive, which forwards a favorable recommendation to City Council without any conditions.
Second.
Andrew had the second. Any discussion? Let's vote.
All right, the vote's unanimous and the motion carries.
Thank you. Staff reports. Any staff report?
We have no report at this time.
Any commissioner
Unless there's-
comments? Seeing everybody's head shaking no, I have no comments.
Happy 4th of July.
Happy upcoming 4th of July. What's on the agenda for 2 weeks from now? Anything?
Week from now.
You do have another hearing case at your next meeting, yes.
Oh, good.
Is it going to be storage again?
It's a PDO request.
It's a
on
what?
It's a PDO request on Curtis Street.
Curtis. Okay.
Curtis Street.
We are adjourned. Thank you.